So through her activism and scholarships over many decades, Angela Davis has been deeply involved in movements from social justice around the world. Her work as an educator, both at the university level and in the larger public sphere, has always emphasized the importance of building communities of struggle for economic, racial, and gender justice. Most recently, she spent 15 years at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she is now Distinguished Professor Emerita of History and Consciousness, an interdisciplinary PhD program, and of feminist studies. Angela Davis is the author of 10 books and has lectured throughout the United States as well as in Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and South America. In recent years, a persistent theme of her work has been the range of social problems associated with incarceration and the generalized criminalization of those communities that are most affected by poverty and racial discrimination. She draws upon her own experiences in the early 70s as a person who spent 8 months in jail and on trial after being placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. She has also conducted extensive research on numerous issues related to race, gender, and imprisonment. Like many educators, Professor Davis is especially concerned with general tendencies to vote to devote resources and attention to prison systems than to educational institutions. Having helped to popularize the notion of prison industrial complex, she now urges her audience to think seriously about the future possibility of a world without prisons and to help forge a 21st century abolitionist movement. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Angela Davis.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this portion of your conference.
Thank you. To start us off, what keeps you inspired to continue the fight for justice today?
You know, what keeps me inspired, I guess, is what inspired me in the first place. And that is the fact that there's a community of people who are passionately involved in creating a better world, people who are fighting back. I never see myself as an individual. And if it were simply about me, I have no idea where I would be. And I think that my own way of imagining myself in the world is through recognizing the importance of community. And just as I was inspired when I was young by the activist community then, I remain inspired by activist communities, generations of activist communities. And right now, I can say that I'm most inspired by all of the young people who are doing, all of this incredible work, recognizing the interconnections among racism and heteropatriarchy and capitalist exploitation.
And for future activists who decide they want to run for office and still challenge the system that they are a part of, do you believe that it is possible that they can make changes within that system that they have newly become a part of?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think that there is one way to be an activist. There's not one correct way to engage in the kind of activism that will help to usher in a new future. If our movement is going to be effective, then people have to create arenas of struggle everywhere. So it's always my advice to think about what you can do to change the terrain where you are. Whether you are on a campus, whether you are in a union, whether you're talking about your workplace, whether you're talking about your cultural environment, you can always figure out how to raise questions of challenging racism and challenging heteropatriarchy and speaking out about the need to protect the environment. And trying to create an international framework. So if one looks at electoral politics, I think we can see how change can happen. Look at the relatively young women now who are the most important body of people within Congress. I'm talking about Ayanna Pressley and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and all of those women are doing amazing work. So yes, run for office, but don't. But be willing to try to subvert the institution, even as you achieve victory, and that is what they are doing. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is so amazing. So yes, get elected, and in the process, organize people, help them to elevate their consciousness during the election period. And when you get elected, make sure you use that position to begin to bring about radical change.
Yes, I think that is so good. I kind of find that's the main importance of assuming those roles, is that you're there to, challenge the system in which it is currently running on. And so moving forward to our following up question is, what is your advice for activists today in, taking care of their mental health amidst silence and uninvolved peers?
Yeah, well, that has always been a question. And, those of you who are young activists today are in a much better situation to address that question than we were, say, 50 years ago, when the whole notion of self-care didn't exist. And when we were, I can remember as a very young activist, I felt that I had to always be there, that I always had to be, I couldn't miss a meeting. I couldn't be late for a meeting. I couldn't, I had to drive myself. I had to drink 10 cups of coffee in order to be able to survive on 4 hours of sleep, which was what was required if we were going to build this revolution. And now I realize how wrong that was, that I should have been willing to recognize that I was a part of a collective undertaking. And that if I needed to rest for a moment, or if anybody needed to rest for a moment, we had to be able to, we should have been able to rely on our comrades to get the work done. The work continues whether I'm in the forefront or whether I'm taking some time off, because I know that I have to attend to my mental health or my physical health. And young activists today, recognize the centrality of care to the collective work of changing the world, and they recognize it not as individual self-care, because I've said so many times, I realized when I went to jail that I needed to start doing something to take care of myself. So I learned how to do yoga from a book when I was in jail. I learned how to meditate. But it was an individual impulse. And I think young activists today recognize that this self-care has to be incorporated into the very process of doing the work.
Yes, I agree. That is very vital. I remember watching a snippet of an interview of yours when you were speaking of, taking care of yourself first before you can even continue, on with your activist and advocate work. It's like the notion of, when you're in a plane and the mother's putting on the mask first themselves in order to help their children out. So, us realizing the importance of that. I really like that portion. And so we went to our next question. We often hear, that it's necessary for us to get involved in movements and towards, abolition, but rarely are told how to. So what do you think are some actionable setups or steps for college students that they can take in the immediacy of this?
Well, I used to think that that one could prescribe the ways in which it would the ways in which important activist undertakings could unfold. And I used to think that if you were a serious, dedicated activist, you would be a member of an organization, you would attend all of the meetings, you would pass out all of the flyers, you would do all of that work. And I did. But then it became apparent to me that that is not the only way to get involved in efforts to change the world. And that, as a matter of fact, I realized, I think early on, that because I was drawn to philosophy, that is what I studied, and that is what I enjoy reading and thinking about, that I had to figure out how to relate what individual, and this is a case of individual proclivities, what I individually enjoy doing to collective activism. And I say this because I don't know whether I would have had such longevity in the struggle if I had not been involved in doing something that also gives me pleasure and makes me feel fulfilled. And so I would encourage people who want to contribute to find a way that that helps them to grow and develop, something that you're not going to do now because you think it's necessary, but after a year it gets boring, and so you try to move on to something else. So if you are an artist, then your art, you can contribute through your art. If you are studying history, you can contribute in that way. If you're interested in organizing workers, you can contribute in that way. I don't think there is there's a single prescription for how to do this work. We want a movement that is so vast that it reaches virtually everyone. And in order to do that, we need people who are going to remain in the struggle. In order to accomplish that, they have to be involved in activities that bring them pleasure and joy and fulfillment.
I know, I really appreciate that response in aspects of saying, like, if you're an artist, you can attribute to it through your art. And it's the idea of also, you can, resistance being a form of joy is joy being a form of resistance. And and with that being said, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Davis. That's all we have time for today. And we appreciate your time and your perspectives on so many of these important topics today that were discussed. And again, Dr. Davis, thank you for your time and attending.
Oh, wonderful. I see all of the thank yous in the chat. And let me also thank you for inviting me to have this conversation with your community. And good luck to all of you.